For years, Ami stood behind her family like the roots of a pine tree. However, while the cameras captured the coldness from the weather, they didn't see the coldness from those who claimed to love her, and sometimes the ones she raised. And now, years after Billy's passing and fighting the kind of illness that forces you to look at every relationship differently, Ami is finally talking. 5 people rubbed her the wrong way. So who are they? And what did they do to leave such a mark on the woman who held her family together for years? Let's find out. The early divide. Most people who tuned into Alaskan Bush People thought they were watching a reality show. From the first season in 2014, the show painted the Browns as an off-the-grid family living deep in Alaska's untouched wilderness. Billy, Amy, and their 7 kids made it seem like a wolf pack that had built their entire lives with bare hands. This involved chopping trees, building homes from scraps, and fishing in freezing rivers. For a while, it was easy to believe it all. When viewers watched, it wasn't just about survival, it was about a family who stuck together no matter what. That's what made the show extremely popular. However, behind all that wilderness was a different version of the story. Even though the Browns did spend time in remote areas, not everything about their lives was as it looked. Over time, fans started noticing the cracks, and people began asking questions about the reality of their isolation. It wasn't just outsiders who saw it, Amy did too. Caught in the middle of it all, she realized that the version of her family being shown to the world wasn't always the version she recognized at home, and one of the first places she felt it was with Matt. Surprised? Let's take a step back and look at the family before we unravel everything. The Alaskan Bush family.
People in the lower 48 do. So I have to go down 75 yards that way to the creek and fill it back up and then haul it back up and dump it back out.
Alaskan Bush People wasn't the usual kind of reality show. It didn't shine a light on red carpets or the buzz of living in the city. Instead, it drew audiences into the wilderness, following the Brown family as they carved out a life far from modern society. On the Discovery Channel, people were instantly drawn to this unfamiliar way of life when it aired for the first time on May 6, 2014. The first episodes showed the Browns in some of the most remote parts of Alaska, from Copper Center, Hoonah, and Chichagof Island. Later, they relocated to Okanogan County, Washington, to keep up with their off-grid lifestyle in a new environment. The show claimed to be unscripted, but as the seasons continued, more people began questioning its authenticity. Viewers started picking scenes apart, wondering whether the family's isolation was truly as extreme as the show suggested, and before long, discussions about the show being staged became harder to ignore. Off-screen, however, the Browns weren't without problems. Yes. For starters, Billy Brown, the father and head of the family, had a complicated past. Back in 1980, he was connected to a horse theft case. On the other hand, Ami Brown, his wife, was at one point mentioned about welfare fraud. Unfortunately, it wasn't until 2014 that their legal troubles caught up with them. The Alaska Department of Revenue launched an investigation, and a grand jury in June issued 60 charges, including counts of unsworn falsification and theft. So, what exactly led to the Alaska Department of Revenue's investigation and the 60 charges against the Brown family, including counts of unsworn falsification and theft? From 2009 through 2012, the Browns applied for the Alaska Permanent Fund dividend by claiming they were full-time state residents. In contrast to the investigations, it claimed they had been living elsewhere for more than half the year, which would make them ineligible for those payments. Billy was hit with 20 of those charges. He was accused of accepting over $21,000 in PFD payments for himself and other family members. Following the investigation, Billy and his son Joshua, known as Bam Bam, accepted a plea deal in 2015. They took responsibility for the rest of the family, excluding Matt, who wasn't living with them then, and Rain, who was still underage. As part of their punishment, they were sentenced to house arrest, required to repay the money, and had to pay additional fines. Despite the controversy, the show didn't slow down. Season 10 aired in 2019, followed by Season 11 that December, and Season 12 debuted in August 2020, as the Browns still had fans willing to watch their story unfold. Interestingly, some parts of Billy's life remained off-screen, including his previous marriage to Brenda Britt, with whom he had a daughter, Twyla Byers, who briefly appeared on the show. There's also speculation about another daughter named Brandy, although details are scarce. Over time, the Brown family became quite a large pack, with Billy and Amy's 7 children: Matt, born in 1982, Joshua, known as Bam Bam, born in 1984, Bear, whose full name is Solomon Isaiah Freedom, born in 1987, Gabe, short for Gabriel Starbuck, Noah, whose full name is Noah Darkcloud, Amora Jean, who goes by Birdie, and the youngest, Merry Christmas Catherine Raindrop, known as Rain, born in 2002. As time went on, their children grew up and started their families. Noah married Rain Alicia, and they have 2 sons, Elijah and Adam. Gabe married Raquel Rose Pantilla, and they are parents to daughters Sophie and Winifred. Bear married Raven Adams, and they have 2 sons, River and Cove. What started as a survival series slowly became the story of a growing legacy through all the seasons. Yet no matter how big the family became or how many new storylines developed, Billy remained at the center of it all. He wasn't just the father, he was the person everyone looked to. But in 2017, everything changed. Amy, at 57, was diagnosed with an advanced stage of lung cancer. The family had to make the hard choice to leave Alaska so she could begin treatment in Washington. And what was once a story about living in nature quickly turned into one about fighting for life. But this wasn't the only tragedy about to hit the Brown family. Another heavy blow in 2021 struck the family. Billy passed away. Fans who had followed the Browns for years felt the loss, and his absence left a deep void. Yet more challenges followed. Ami, who had beaten cancer once, was suddenly rushed to the hospital again. Bear and Snowbird let fans know that she had been suffering from chest pain and breathing issues. Later on, she was quickly transferred to a larger facility and admitted into the ICU as the doctors suspected pneumonia and placed her on a breathing machine. Snowbird described her condition clearly, seriously. Her lungs were in bad shape, and things were critical for a family that had already watched her survive the impossible once before. Now here's why. Back in 2017, Ami's odds of beating cancer were low. She had a living chance of just 3% and had gone through chemotherapy and radiation. What's more, they had uprooted their lives for her health, buying a 435-acre property in Washington to be close to hospitals. Fortunately, by the end of 2018, she had entered remission. Yet for everything Ami had been through, from survival to sickness, there was still one part of her story that never quite made it to air. Because if someone told you Ami Brown held on to some deeply buried resentments toward a few people in her circle, would you believe it? Well, you're about to see why that just might be true. Number 1. Matt Brown. There was a time when Matt Brown was at the center of everything. The oldest of the Brown children, who took charge when a storm was coming or something had to be built from scratch, Matt often led the way through whatever chaos the family found themselves in. However, by 2019, everything changed. Matt Brown disappeared from Alaskan Bush People without warning, and this development was peculiar to many viewers. Matt had been there from the beginning. When the show first aired in 2014, he was already carrying a weight none of the others had yet grown into. But somewhere along their journey, that weight got heavier. In 2016, he entered rehab for alcohol addiction, and this was the first sign to the world that something was breaking beneath the surface. At a point, when the Browns moved from Alaska to Washington in 2018, Matt decided to stay behind in California. The family said very little about it, and so did he. But everybody knew that whatever bond had held them together was slowly coming off. Matt entered rehab again that year, and this time it felt like he wasn't just trying to recover from addiction. He was trying to recover from the pressure of everything that came with being a Brown. When he decided to come clean about the situation in April 2021, he explained that he felt betrayed, but not just that. He claimed he never made money from the show because his father controlled everything. For him, while Alaskan Bush People was bringing in a serious income of about $300,000, he was cold, hungry, and broke. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that year, something darker surfaced. Two women, Jessica and Shelley, came forward with allegations that Matt had assaulted them days apart in the summer of 2019. According to them, he had been drinking, and they were both working closely with him at the time, trying to help him or manage his addiction. Jessica had met him through her job as a coordinator on Alaskan Bush People. Shelley, on the other hand, said she was homeless when Matt offered her a job as a personal manager. She thought she was helping a friend. Instead, she says, she was assaulted. Revealing what had transpired between them, Jessica described a night she would never forget. She explained she was in the pool, barely able to swim, and fighting with every strength in her to push him off her. Then she described the sentence that would haunt her for eternity: "Take your glasses off." To her, that was the last thing she heard, and she believed that was something only a predator would say. Eventually, it was Shelley who pulled him off her, grabbed him by the shoulder and his hair, and yanked him out of the pool. Just 3 days later, Shelley said it happened again to her. Following the event, they reported everything to the LAPD. The DA then reviewed the case but didn't prosecute it. Still, their stories didn't change. Ever since, he never returned to the show that summer. And when you look at how his name faded from family conversations, you start to understand why. By 2001, even Bear, Matt's younger brother, decided to open up about the distance. He told reporters that Matt was doing his own thing and that they hadn't been close in a long time. Bear didn't hold back when fans eventually asked if Matt would return for the next season. He said Matt didn't want to be part of the family anymore. Why take his word over the whole family? On the other hand, Ami never spoke publicly about any of it. She didn't correct Matt, didn't defend him, and didn't deny anything. But those who knew her said she felt the hurt that's hard to describe. Why do you think this happened? Well, Matt Brown was her first son, and no matter how much distance, time, and pain had been placed between them, he was still the boy who once sat beside her. Today, he is the first person who made her feel like the family wasn't as strong as she believed. And the deeper she looked, the more she realized that the cracks didn't stop with Matt. Number 2, Noah Brown. Noah Brown had always been the opposite of his siblings, who leaned into the off-grid culture. While other Brown brothers leaned into the wild image the world expected from them, Noah always seemed to be the emotional and sensitive one. And to Amy, he had once felt like the safest. Unfortunately, even that changed. For all the storms the family weathered together, nothing prepared Amy for the moment when one of her own turned against her. In April 2025, just days before his sister Rain and Rain's husband Josiah were arrested on a long list of charges, Noah called the police. He wasn't calling to report them directly. He was calling for a welfare check on his mother, Amy. Noah said he had gotten a strange, disconnected message from her and that she wasn't making sense. Worse still, she had been introduced to meth by Rain and Josiah. He told the officer she was off her meds, that her condition was getting worse, and that Rain wasn't letting her take the medication she needed. He described her as couch surfing with Rain and Josiah in some remote cabin called Liar's Cove. He said Josiah was always armed and aggressive, but that's just the tip of the iceberg on these allegations. Noah alleged that Rain had even stolen a firearm from him. The moment that may have made Ami feel like the ground beneath her was giving way was when Noah said his mother and sister called Josiah the next Messiah. Whether Noah meant it as concern or condemnation, it didn't matter. Because once that call was made, once Amy's name was handed to authorities as a possible substance user, as someone unstable, something inside her broke. This was her son. The same boy she raised under canopies of trees and along muddy riverbanks. The one she had believed would never put her in the same sentence as meth and madness. But now, he had. And whether or not there was truth in what he believed, what mattered more was that he thought it. To make things worse, this wasn't the first time Noah had turned against Rain. Back in 2024, he and his then-wife, Rain, filed a restraining order against her, accusing her of harassment, substance use, and violence. He detailed incidents that dated back years. One involved Rain allegedly offering a substance to Amy for a headache. Another described a moment during filming when Rain told Noah the world would be easier if he were not living anymore. He told stories of horses suffering because Rain and Snowbird wouldn't listen to his instructions, and to this effect they lost a horse in the process. When he tried to intervene, Rain allegedly threatened to take the life of the horse herself, and even told him to sit in his truck or else she would get her weapon. These weren't just petty arguments. These accusations cut straight into the family's heart, and Noah didn't keep them private as he wrote them into official court declarations. Perhaps to Amy, it didn't feel like protection. It felt like betrayal. What wounded her most wasn't the idea that her son thought she needed help. It was that he went to strangers before coming to her. And while she never said it out loud, something inside her changed after that. Number 3. Amy Brown and Erlene Meemaw Branson. Before cameras ever followed Amy Brown through the forest, she was just a teenage girl from Texas. She was 15 and still in high school, figuring out who she was meant to be. But in 1979, all of that changed. She ran off with Billy Brown, a man 11 years older, and within months they were married. Her mother, Erlene Meemaw Branson, agreed to the marriage, although it came with one clear condition. Amy had to stay in school and finish her education. But that promise didn't last long. Shortly after the wedding, Amy dropped out, disappeared from her family's life, and never looked back. Her mother and brother didn't see or speak to her for over 3 decades. They had no idea of her whereabouts. Although Amy never publicly said why she cut them off, her brother Les believed it wasn't entirely her choice. According to Les, Billy controlled everything, especially Amy's connection to the outside world. He said Billy decided she should cut ties with their family. When Les tried to ask him about the marriage agreement, the deal their mother had made, Billy allegedly shot back with a line Les never forgot. "That's none of your mother's business now. She belongs to me." That was the moment Les knew something wasn't right. On television, Amy was portrayed as a gentle, quiet, and obedient wife who stood behind Billy, supported him, and helped build a life with him in the wilderness. Viewers admired their bond, often calling it old-fashioned and inspiring. But while that carefully crafted image played out each week on the Discovery Channel, a very different and painful reality was unfolding behind the scenes. Amy's mother, estranged and heartbroken, watched the same show from a distance, not as a fan, but as a grieving parent, silently hoping for just one more chance to speak to the daughter who had seemingly disappeared from her life. When Amy was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer in 2017, and given just a 3% chance of survival, her mother tried everything she could to find her. Les said that Amy's mother called hospitals and contacted anyone with information about where Amy was living or staying. Despite never receiving any response or making direct contact, she refused to give up. Her efforts were constant and determined, driven by the hope of reconnecting with her daughter, even if all she had to go on were faint leads and unanswered calls. Before her demise in 2020, Erlene Branson began confusing television with reality. She had Alzheimer's and pneumonia, so sometimes she would look at the screen and believe Amy was already gone. During that trying phase, her family had to keep reminding her that Amy was still alive. Before she passed, Erlene said something that stayed with Les. She told him, "Tell Amy I forgive her." But the forgiveness ended there. She didn't forgive Billy. She blamed him entirely for keeping her daughter away. According to Les, his mother died believing Billy had stolen Amy's life and shattered their family beyond repair. And Les agreed. He didn't just dislike Billy, he despised him. He said Billy isolated Amy, cut her off from everyone who loved her, and twisted that isolation into something the show could sell as survival. Still, Amy never defended herself through all the years of praise and pain. She never corrected the image the world saw. Even when Billy passed away, she chose to speak lovingly about the man who had taken her from her roots. And maybe that's what made it so hard to read. People often ask why Amy seems so guarded, or why her loyalty sometimes bends in ways that confuse her children. Why does she remain so reserved, careful with her words, and fiercely protective of a man many see as controlling? These questions have followed her for years, especially as her public image grew through the television screen. But perhaps the truth lies in a chapter of her life that she never speaks about, the one buried deep beneath years of silence and distance. It's the chapter in which a 15-year-old girl vanishes into the Alaskan wilderness with a man nearly twice her age, who will become her husband, the father of her children, and the center of her entire world. She doesn't just leave home, she disappears from it, cutting off ties, abandoning her past, and building a new life that few can understand. And then, more than 30 years later, she re-emerged, not as the bright, spirited teenager her family remembered, but as a completely different person, a woman shaped by survival, loyalty, and secrecy, so transformed by the life she chose, or perhaps the life chosen for her, that even those who once knew her best could no longer recognize her. Number 4. Les Branson. It hadn't been just Amy's mother she cut out of her life. While fans of Alaskan Bush People were being asked to send prayers as she faced an aggressive battle with lung cancer, one voice remained missing, her older brother, Les Branson. Les hadn't spoken to Amy in over 38 years, and at the time when her health declined, he had grown desperate to reconnect. But he believed there was one reason that never happened. According to Les, Billy made sure Amy's side of the family was utterly cut off, and now, with time working against them, Les had resorted to the only option he felt was left: social media. He shared an emotional message inside a Facebook group called The Alaskan Bush People, The Facts, The Fair, hoping it might somehow reach her. He wrote, "In the end, I have only Facebook to send a message, hoping somehow Ami will know that we cannot even write to her as she suggested, and to tell her how much we still love her, miss her, and are sorry we couldn't do more." Les explained that their family had been writing to Amy for nearly 4 decades, but they never received anything back. In his eyes, Billy had isolated her on purpose. Billy wanted Amy all to himself. He wanted to isolate Amy and keep her from her family, and he has successfully done so for 38 years. To those who only knew Ami from television, the story seemed impossible. She had always been portrayed as a kind and nurturing mother, standing strong beside her children even as they grew up and faced challenges. How could someone so loving turn her back on the people who knew her first? Billy had described Amy's early life in his memoir as difficult. He claimed she grew up poor and endured abuse from her father. He claimed her parents split up when she was just 8 years old, painting a picture of a fractured childhood. But Les disputed every word of that version. He believed Billy had twisted Amy's memories, rewriting her story to pull her closer to him and farther away from everyone else. The years went by, but the distance remained. Les said their mother passed, heartbroken, still waiting for a chance to see Amy one last time. And Les had kept hoping, even after all the silence, that maybe, just maybe, his sister would one day respond. He didn't blame her entirely, but he did believe Billy was why she disappeared from their lives. Number 5. Robert Maughan. Now, if there was anyone Amy Brown might be bitter toward, it might be Robert Maughan. His name didn't make headlines at first, but that changed in April 2020. Robert, a doctor from Tennessee, filed a lawsuit that didn't just go after Billy Brown's estate. It opened the wound the Alaskan Bush family was trying to heal. According to the court filings, Robert claimed he had given Billy $20,000 back in January of that year. It was supposed to be an investment. Billy had promised him 10% of the money earned from any books, sales, or creative works produced by Alaskan Wilderness Family Productions, the company tied to the Brown family. The agreement was to last 10 years, and Robert said he trusted Billy to honor it. But the years went by, and not a single payment showed up. However, this didn't end there. In early 2009, Robert said they signed a second contract. This time, he invested another $10,000. But this wasn't just a short-term deal. The new agreement promised him 10% of all gross earnings tied to Billy's creative work. Books, television, documentaries, even movies. Still nothing came. Then came the launch of Alaskan Bush People, and Robert watched as Billy's fame and fortune grew. He believed Billy had been pulling in as much as $500,000 per episode, and with the seasons running 10 episodes or more, he estimated the show alone had generated millions, so he took legal action. Robert wanted $500,000 in damages and a trial to prove he deserved a share of what he helped fund. However, things got a little more heated in 2022. Robert returned to court to ask that Amy Brown, Billy's widow, be officially named in the lawsuit. After all, she had already been involved, acting as the executor of Billy's estate. He argued that she wasn't just representing Billy's legacy anymore because, as his wife and someone closely tied to the family's creative empire, she had her stake in everything being fought over. In the court's eyes, since Billy and Amy were married when the contracts were signed, and the income in question could qualify as marital property, it was legally necessary to bring Amy in by name. Her legal team pushed back hard, filing a motion to dismiss the case entirely. They argued that the federal court didn't even have the authority to hear the lawsuit, and that it belonged in state probate court, where Billy's estate was already being handled. Still, Robert's attorney didn't flinch. He kept pushing forward, filing copies of both contracts and even submitting a formal creditor's claim to the estate, making it clear that they were hell-bent on seeing this case to the end. And maybe that's what stung the most. It wasn't just about money or contracts. It forced Amy to relive chapters of Billy's past that she likely hoped were long closed. She never commented publicly about the lawsuit, not once. But those who followed closely could see the weight it added to everything she was already carrying. No matter what Robert believed he was owed, nothing compared to the night everything stopped when Billy Brown collapsed. The fight over his legacy became far more painful. Amy had become a symbol of strength and devotion in the Alaskan Bush People world. So after everything from the distance to the silence, accusations, and the grief, was it hate that kept her apart from them, or was it something deeper? Maybe for Amy Brown, revealing the people she cut off wasn't about revenge or bitterness. Perhaps it was the only way to protect the version of herself that still believed in peace. Either way, now we know who they were, and more importantly, why. What's your view of Amy's life now? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, explore the other videos on your screen.